Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of May 3rd, 2021. Please rise for a prayer by Pastor Mark Brown of Jesus Church.
Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to gather here today in your name. We ask that your kingdom would come and that your will would be done, that your very presence would be in this room. God, we have our thoughts, our ways, our agendas, our opinions. But God, we are limited and we are finite. And we ask, God, that your wisdom would be here and that your will would be here, that you would lead us, guide us, and direct us today and order our steps in your word and in your will. We ask and pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Here. Hoyer?
Here.
Oline?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti?
Here.
Rudowski?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. And before I get a motion, I want to pull item G, which is the authorization for the mayor to sign the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act grant onto the regular, onto the regular part of the agenda. So I got a motion by Vilhauer.
Question?
Mayor, I think Councilman Roby has a question.
Councilman
Can
Roby,
you guys hear me okay?
you're light, but we can hear you.
All right, I'll try and make sure I lean in here. I would like to move item, make sure I got the right one here, 5C to before 8A. I'd like to address that.
Okay, we're moving item 5C, which is the appointment of Rich Thomas. To the top of the regular agenda, and we're moving item 5G to the end of the regular agenda. Are there any other changes? So I had a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. Is that okay with you to make that additional change? Yes. All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay. Item 6 is the public comment period. This is the time reserved for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. We do have a sign-up sheet for in-person comments and a policy for all. If anyone wishes to speak, please come forward or say permission to speak if you're online. Mitchell, can you hand me the form, please?
Mayor, if I could have the floor then.
Sure. Councilman Albertson?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of guests here tonight from the Mayor's Committee from Disabilities. And I know most of you have been aware of the fact the last few months we've talked a lot about a park for disabled people. And these two ladies have been instrumental in really working with us to get this park. And at our last meeting, the city rec department had informed us that we do in fact have this park for disabled people coming hopefully this summer. You know, there's a lot of always ifs, but we think this summer for a park for disabled people. And so I would publicly like to thank the committee for all the work that they've done to get this park. It's going to really be something else. It's something that other communities don't have, and we haven't had, and I feel bad about it, but it's happening now, and so thank you to the ladies for that. Another project that they're working on is having the ability to have disabled people get a break to go to our health center, our wellness center, sorry, not the health center, wellness center. And these two ladies brought a proposal to our committee meeting last week, and the mayor was there, Mayor Karen was there, and I was there. And we thought it sounded like something that we would like our committee of our board members here to listen to. And so Julie and Jamie have both willingly said that they would come to this meeting and just speak about what they're thinking for this. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Jamie from the Mayor's Committee for Disabled People, or committee. So
Okay, we do have several people that want to speak, so if you could keep it to 5 minutes or so, that would be good.
Yep, will do. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Dan, for the comments. We're very excited about the ADA park. So thank you, City of Watertown, for all of your support with that. The last time I did visit with you, we did celebrate some awards, and one of the students, the group of students that had kind of spearheaded the ADA park, we did nominate them for the Governor's Award, and that was submitted this month, and the awards will be chosen in July, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that maybe that group or any of those awards that we presented would receive those Governor Awards. But thank you for your time, councilmen and women, and Mayor Sarah, for allowing me to take the time to visit with a possible opportunity for our community's benefit. I'm Jamie Folk, President of the Mayor's Committee with People with Disabilities, and this is Julie Miller, a committee member. In our committee, we have discussed and agreed that there's a need in our community to promote wellness for all people. And one of the ways to do this is to allow all community members the opportunity to use our local community wellness center. This presents a challenge due to the high membership costs of these programs, which does not allow everyone the opportunity to participate as they may want. This could be due to being on a limited income or having limited resources. We're asking for the City of Watertown to support a proposed plan for discounted membership costs to the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center for those individuals who would qualify for financial need assistance. This could be a scholarship program or an opportunity to give back for volunteer hours. Qualifying discounts could include people who fall under the categories of being on Medicaid or Medicare, insurance, receiving Social Security benefits, or having a documented disability. There are surrounding communities such as Aberdeen and Melbank that already have financial assistance programs available through an application process. We have provided examples of the financial assistance information from Aberdeen's YMCA and Melbank's Unity Health and Fitness Center. Dan had passed them out to the council earlier today. We would be happy to answer any questions you have to help at developing this discounted financial program for the wellness of our community members. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll consider this.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Barb Brinkman has also signed up to speak about the Spring Litter Blitz.
Thank you for doing your jobs and being here. And this time of the year, I usually show up and have slides and whatever, encouraging people to sign up for an area to just join the citywide spring litter cleanup or spring litter blitz. Well, we're not doing the organized blitz. You can just decide what time you want to do it, what day, when the weather permits. Grab your pet or your friend or just a bag and go out and walk, pick up what you see. We encourage groups, families, friends, or if you're just going out with your dog or just enjoying the springtime, look around you, see what areas need to be cleaned up a little bit. there's always something that flies out of a car window or purposely gets dropped. Uh, you know, we can take it upon ourselves to rectify that and keep our city looking nice. So just look around. You use your own supplies, your own bags that you have at your house, or trash bags, gloves, rubber gloves would be good, or, you know, the vinyl gloves. Be aware of safety, you know, any water hazards or traffic. And if you've used to going to a certain area, maybe check it out. Parks, boulevards, any public place. If you want to go in a private place, you need to check with that owner. You might even put a little competition into this. Who can find the weirdest item? You know, we've had Halloween buckets. I think Glenn found one of that. I found Easter bunny ears one year. And every year, there's always money, coins, and folding bills. So it's out there. You know, litter just doesn't happen. I think it's maybe absent-minded, or that wind tunnel that happens when we open the driver's car door and the passengers, and whoop, at the same time, and out flies stuff that we didn't mean to have happen. So just with a little bit of thought, we can keep maybe litter to just a litter, small amount. So keep a litter bag in your vehicle, maybe a couple, front and back seats. The grocery cart, take that ad that's in there with you and your shopping list. Don't let it fly out and create more litter. So we appreciate this. We really want to, salute the Friends of the Big Sioux. They started out great with the season with cleaning up an area. And so we'll just kind of keep going. And this just doesn't have to happen in the spring. It can happen all year long. So if you see some litter, take some action, be motivated to pick it up and deposit it in the right container. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you. All right, that's all that was on the list. Is there anyone else that had come with the intention of speaking in the open? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on to item 7, approval of the agenda. So we have the two additions. Item C from the consent agenda is moved, and item G from the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion by Y and a second by Bueller.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I guess we haven't taken a vote, but I would like to recuse myself from items on the agenda.
Okay, which ones?
A, B, and G.
Yeah.
Correct.
So Councilman Y, Councilman Roby, and Councilman Hoyer, all recusing from items A, B, and G.
Yep.
Any other?
Correct, Roby, A, B, and G, correct, thank you.
Yes. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, item 5C, which has been moved, is the appointment of Rich Thomas as a member of the Municipal Utilities Board. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion by Hoyer and a second by Bueller. Was that Bueller?
Yeah.
All right. Any discussion? Councilman Roby?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for moving the item. I just wanted to have a brief discussion on this point. This is a political appointee, and it's the mayor's privilege, and I'm respectful of that privilege. I am not speaking to oppose that appointment. I am acquainted with Rich. I think he's a good man. This is an important board, and this will be the second time in a row, to my understanding, that we've taken off a one-term, 5-year term person. Greg, the current incumbent, if you will, I know was interested in staying on. I did talk with him. I did talk with Steve Lehner also just to get his input. My understanding, he was notified of this, but did not have an opportunity, staff didn't have an opportunity to have any input on this, which, I think that should be a respect or courtesy that's provided. So I guess I just want to know, why is Arby not appointing the incumbent?
Why am I not appointing the incumbent?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't really feel like I should have to explain that, but I will, since you asked. I feel very strongly that in public boards, including the city council, that any citizen who wants to speak should be given the opportunity. And I do that again and again at our council meetings. There has been a little bit of pushback from some of the council members who don't always want people to be able to speak, but I feel that that's really important. And with the incumbent whose term was expiring, disallowed someone from speaking at the utility board meeting, that was very upsetting to me. That is, I agree with you that the person whose term is expiring is a very community-minded, he's a good board member, but I disagree with that philosophy of not allowing free and open communication on public boards. That's a very important board. It is a public board. People should be able to speak. And so I just disagree with ratcheting that down. I'm looking for openness and transparency on the boards to which I appoint. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? I do think the person is a very community-minded, kind person. I just disagreed with that. All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item A is application for a special event retail license to Lake Area Zoological Society from 4:00 p.m. Friday, June 18, 2021 until 10:00 p.m. Friday, June 18, 2021 to be held at Bramble Park Zoo. I believe this is
So moved.
Sip and Safari. Okay, we have a motion by Albertson. And a second, somebody wave. Pauline. And I see Jamie Strickers here from the zoo. Would you like to come and tell us about it?
So I'm Jamie Stricker. I'm the zoo educator at the zoo, and we are excited this year to be able to have events again. Last year we didn't get to have a single event at the zoo, so our calendar is looking more normal and getting full. And so we are starting with our first event, which is Sip and Safari, as Mayor said, and that's our big fundraiser for the Zoo Society. And so it will be adults only, 21 and over, so the zoo does close at 4. That's when we'll start turning it over for the evening event. Tickets are $40, and then people can walk around the zoo, enjoy the zoo, different foods from around the community, and different types of drinks. And so we have alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and it's a night where people don't feel like they have to have a kid to come to the zoo. So adults can come and have a date night and helps to support us. So thank you so much for your support of the zoo.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
The Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, anything you want to add?
Nothing to add, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any discussion, Council? Seeing none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item B is application for a transfer of ownership and location of a retail on-sale liquor and video lottery license from SNL Entertainment LLC, doing business as Sparky's Bar, 19 North Broadway, to Lake City Entertainment LLC, doing business as Lake City Entertainment LLC, 717 South Broadway. Have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. And I will ask the Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, to tell us a little about this.
Thank you, Mayor. This application is for the transfer and ownership of the retail liquor There was no reason to go to Board of Adjustment. It's actually transferring to a location that already has a license. Other than that, if there's any questions, I can try to answer them.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. If there's anyone here to speak about this item, please come forward and state your name for the record.
Yeah, I can speak about it. Ryan Wilford is my name. Yeah, so we purchased the liquor license from Sparky's Bar in Watertown, and we're moving it down to 717 South Broadway. We're moving it there right now and then waiting to hear from the Board of Adjustments on Thursday. And then after we get a conditional use permit approved, we will then move it to its permanent new location.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone else that wanted to speak at the public hearing? See no one, I will close the public hearing and see if the council has any questions or comments. None? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Item C is the second reading of ordinance number 21-12, a zoning text amendment to chapter 21.80, addressing city identification / welcome signs, number, dimensions, and locations of individual signs, and maximum total sign area by zoning district. Have a motion by Hoyer. Second. And a second by Helene. And I'll ask the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to tell us about this, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is something that's been in the works for quite some time. It kind of got put on pause throughout last year due to COVID and attentions being focused elsewhere. But late in 2019, I believe, is when this was initiated. Urban planner Brandy Hanton started some work after she was approached by some private donors within the community and members of a subcommittee of the former H2020 charrette. And they had gotten together to meet with Brandy and talked about updating the Welcome to Watertown sign located out on I-29 and Highway 212. In doing that and looking at making some upgrades to that gateway sign, we realized inadvertently the city had not addressed city monument gateway identification signage in our new sign ordinance. So what we needed to do was make an amendment to that ordinance in this chapter 21.80 that would help address that issue and make it allowable for us to go ahead and reinstall or reconstruct or install new, in some cases, new gateway signs for the community. And that's exactly what this ordinance does. It lists them in there with some criteria regarding the signage, sizes and locations and things like that that would have to be followed. With that, this is second reading. The Planning Commission did recommend approval on their April 8th meeting unanimously by a vote of 7-0. And I believe Brandy and Stacy are both online with us, and we can all stand by for questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone here that wants to speak about this item? If so, please state your name for the record.
Julie Knudsen from the Watertown Convention and Visitors Bureau. I know you're talking about the zoning and the height and things of the sign, but I do want to mention the CVB has got a branding initiative that we have launched a couple of months ago, so we're knee deep in that. We'll be receiving RFPs from about 7 different marketing firms. And so when that design, when you start looking at the design, I just wanted kind of an FYI that I know we talked about possibly the city looping in if that was something that you all liked once we do get that put together. So there may be that consideration just on the front end of this.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Councilman Bueller?
Question for you, Julie, if you don't mind. Who decides, I mean, you said you're working with these marketing organizations. Who makes the decision on what you're going to go with?
What we did, we sent out a survey last year, and I think it went out to all of you folks, kind of just a very simple, you know, kind of giving your feeling about Watertown, what you love about it, those kind of things. We send our RFPs out to tourism-based marketing organizations. We've got we've got one local here in town, we've got one out of Sioux Falls, and then the rest of them kind of throughout the country. Just because tourism branding is very different from any other kind of branding, because what we're trying to do is make people really want to come here. We have to inspire them to want to learn more. So it's a very different type of branding. And so we're going with people that are primarily tourism-based marketing firms. One of them out of Austin, Texas. I think it was Austin, Texas, and they did, I believe, the Don't Mess with Texas. We've got a couple of them that have done the state branding for a couple of different states throughout the country. So there's some very qualified people for what we're doing. And from the branding standpoint, you know, the Watertown part of it, we want to make it flexible so it has some shelf life. So there's some things that we can change along the way as maybe things grow and things. So, but there's a board of CVB directors, and then there's someone from the bid board on there as well. And then we'll sit down and discuss that. And I think once we get it down to a couple of options, or once if there's one that just stands out, then we'll be able to share that for some perspective. But since the messaging is more or less going to be out nationally, that branding is going to be probably kept kind of close to the tourism end of it. What we're looking at is maybe some of the brand standards, the color, maybe the logo design, things like that, that maybe Watertown as a city can grab onto to create some consistency within the city, rather than having different brands for every department or every leg of the city. So we're going to foot the bill for it, and then if there's something about it that you guys like that you want to tie in. And we did talk to the development company and the Chamber of Commerce, and both of them kind of have their brands set, and so there really wasn't any interest in partnering on that. So we just needed to move forward because Watertown, South Dakota's rising star needs to go.
Agreed.
25 years, so.
Hasn't been that long.
Yeah, we don't owe it anything. It's been around, and it's.
Since you were 10 years old, Mayor.
And we're still rising. I don't know. We haven't apparently gotten to where we're going, so.
Thanks, Julie.
We're still on the go too, right?
Yeah, we're on the go.
I still have some of that stuff. It's probably, I don't know if it's worth anything, but it's kind of fun when you find it in the workroom, so.
Yes.
I've got a question as long as you're up there, Julie. When we discussed this our first reading a couple of weeks ago, there was some thought that 2,000 square feet for a maximum signage is a huge sign. Do you have any gut reaction to that, or any thoughts from your perspective? I'm hitting you cold in this, I know, but just thought as long as you're there, if you have any thoughts on it.
I guess I'm a real visual person, so I would need to probably have something to compare that to I think the sign that we have out on I-29 and 212 right now is not nearly visible enough. I think it just blends in with the background out there, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know what other cities do. I'm sure there's a lot of really cool designs out there that, so I don't have that answer, I guess. I think visibility is a big deal, but more so just welcoming people, because obviously they're not going to pull off because of the sign. We just want to say welcome.
You know, can I interject real quick? I know that a lot of signage along our freeway, they kind of have minimum standard sizes for visibility at certain speeds, you know, so that's going to have probably something to do with how we want to do that, how high it is, all those kind of things. But I think you kind of got to do what you got to do for the speed and the distance from the road. So.
Well, I think when you're talking about 212, Don Roby is probably the closest to the cuff there, because DOT is probably going to, South Dakota DOT is probably going to be in charge. I'm pretty sure they will, because when we did signage for the fireworks, they were in full control, and that was out for a day. So,
yeah, thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could follow up to add some context to Councilman Vilhauer's question, I believe, and Brandy can help confirm this, but I believe we based that 2,000 square feet, Glenn, on the current measurements of that current sign. I think off the top of my head, they were around 1,200, and that's if you go and includes some of the structural landscaping around the sign that would be considered as part of the sign area. But if you could expand on that, Brandy, is that correct?
Yeah, and so I did additional research from our last discussion during the first reading, and actually from my measurements it looks like that the existing sign is 600 square feet, but the sign that we were looking at installing or designing at the time was around 1,200 square feet. So it really was just to allow for flexibility during the design, and then ultimately the council will have to approve the design, so you would make sure that it fit with the area, as well as staff and the committee working on that would be checking that as well. But it is a 2,000 square feet is a bit excessive. So if we do want to limit it further, I mean, we could, but it's just to allow for greater flexibility. And then if you do a design where maybe you have it's facing two different fronts with like a V design of some sort, all of that just allows for the flexibility.
Thanks, Brandy.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I closed the public hearing. Is there anyone else that's here to speak about this? Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing now in case I hadn't before. Any other discussion from the council? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Mayor, I just got a note from the finance officer here that there was an error on the agenda. There should have been a public hearing for the special event license for the zoo.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you could, I know that Jamie spoke, but if you could maybe just open up a public hearing just so we have that box checked.
Will do. You bet. Thank you for letting me know. So item A was the application for a special event retail license to Lake Area Zoological Society from 4:00 p.m. Friday, June 18, 2021 until 10:00 p.m. Friday, June 18, 2021 to be held at Bramble Park Zoo. And I'm going to open the public hearing at this time. If anyone is here to speak about this item, please come forward and state your name for the record. See no one, I will close the public hearing. Do we need to take action again? No. No? No. Okay. Check that box.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Item D is Valley View 3rd Edition Annexation and Zoning. Item 1 is approval of resolution number 21-17 initiating annexation of attractive land contiguous to the city of Watertown, South Dakota, to be known as Valley View 3rd Edition. And I will ask the Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to tell us about this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. First item being annexation of this area. This is Valley View up in the northern part of town. Off the, as I've shared on my screen here, off the southerly end of this map would be 14th Avenue running east and west, left to right. And then we have 2nd Street running north and south. Valley View Phase 1 are these orange outlined lots that exist. Phase 2 was this portion here, this rectangular area, and then Phase 3 is this black bold outlined area that is in question now tonight. Tonight are two actions. First one being the annexation approval, and then subsequent to that would be the zoning. Again, gone through the Planning Commission and has been recommended for approval. There are, when we get into the zoning discussion, we can point out a couple of changes in the from the preliminary plan zoning that was originally shown. Maybe I'll mention them now briefly just out of context for the annexation as well. But these two black hatched areas were originally shown in the preliminary plan to be R1, I believe, and now they're proposed to be R2. So there is that change from the originally approved preliminary plan. All the appropriate contacts and notices have been made, particularly with this current existing house. It's the only land or parcel adjacent to that zoning change that was different from the preliminary plan. There weren't any objections to the zoning from that resident. And other than that, again, Brandy Hanton's online, and so is Stacy Bungard from the Planning and Zoning, and we'll stand by for questions.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. If anyone is here to speak about this item, please come forward and state your name for the record. See no one, I'll close the public hearing. Council, any questions or comments?
Would you like a motion?
Oh, didn't I get one? Yes, I do need a motion. Motion by Hoyer and a second by Y. Thank you. Discussion, Councilman Hoyer?
So when this came up in the Planning Commission, there was a little bit of discussion with it. Heath, if you could go to the image that shows where the park is on this. So the park was prior approved to all this. It was figured out earlier. I think it's one more down there. Yep. The way it's kind of slated right now, if you watch the green on the left half of it, that's essentially going to be a trail that builds out, which is really lovely. But the only park that was chosen in this development is the one to the south there, which is that long stretch of green. Or not south, excuse me. Or yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yep, to the south. Yeah, fun, right? So it's a long stretch of green. If you're familiar with that area, that's along 14th. One of the discussions that was kind of brought up here is just some more consideration perhaps in the future when we look at developments of where these things are going to go. One of the first things I would mention about it is just if you go to the north of the development and the distance to the south, it's quite a stretch. It's not a very centralized park within this development, and it kind of just seems like an obligation that's being filled. There's no equipment on it currently. Just the bike path kind of cuts through there, and it's a little bit more of a drainage ditch than anything in most of it. But just something that maybe we need to look at in the future a little bit more with when we're approving our preliminary plans for developments. Thinking that maybe it would have been more appropriate to put it, and this is my opinion on it, but put it a little more closer to like 17th Avenue North and Grant Drive where that's being proposed, which is in the center of the development. Could be a little bit more equitable to everyone in that area. I do understand that to the east there is Jefferson, which is available, but just for the sake of kids to be able to access a park in an easy fashion that isn't next to one of the busiest roads in our community might be something to think about in the future when we're doing these developments. But all in all, it's good to see the mixed use of zoning in it. Lots of options for housing. It should turn out to be really great, and can't complain with adding onto the trail system because we have a really great one in town. So it's fantastic.
Right, thank you. Anyone else? Councilman Bueller?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to make Councilman Hoyer, I understand what your thinking is there. I will say that these are scrutinized quite heavily by the Park and Rec Department. We've looked at this several times, and those are concerns that we typically always have. So these aren't taken lightly, and we don't necessarily, as far as I've ever seen, look at trying to take junk property. We try to do what we think is right for that area, and we also have to have concern for adjacent development as well. So where they're placed, and on certain instances we take money in lieu of the park, for the percentage of the property that they develop. But I don't know, Brandy, do you want to add anything to that conversation? I don't want anybody to think that these things that they're taken lightly, because they aren't, and we do spend quite a bit of time on them. So Brandy, is there anything you want to add?
Right. Good points there, Bruce, because these are looked at during the preliminary plan phase, and then they do go to the park board, who have ultimate approval of what they want to accept for the park dedication. And Plan Commission did echo those same concerns that Councilman Hoyer had brought up about what we're looking at. Of course, we will continue to look at each proposal. I think, though, that what was dedicated for Valley View, for the Valley View addition, really could be usable. I actually walked out on site just on my own time just to see if there is quite a bit of usable space there on that, where Heath is putting that pointer, that it still could be developed and have a small playset or a parking lot for a trailhead entrance, things of that sort. But I think it is nice as well to have our rec trail along 14th there, that's all within the dedicated parkland. And I do think that there's opportunities to develop it into something nice.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, for the annexation, I'll All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, the second part of this is the second reading of ordinance number 21-11, establishing the zoning designation of R1 Single Family Residential District, R2 Single Family Attached Residential District, and R3 Multifamily Residential District for the area of land to be known as the Valley View 3rd Edition upon annexation. Have a motion by Lallam and a second by Bueller. And I will ask the Public Works Director if he has any more to add for the zoning.
I'll just clarify that this, I'll call it salmon color, pinkish color. Maybe I'm colorblind this evening. Anyway, this on the east side, this will be R3, an extension of the current R3 that's in phase 1 and 2. And then this hatched portion, the brighter yellow, is proposed to be R2. And then the lighter yellow throughout the rest of the subdivision will be R1. And again, this hatched area would also be R2. So R3, R2, and R1 throughout this phase.
All right, thank you. I'll open the public hearing. If anyone is here to speak about this item, please come forward and state your name for the record. See no one, I'll close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions or comments? Councilman Villar?
This doesn't pertain directly to this or to the annexation that we just acted on, but I do have a question. I know when this whole development first started, there was a lot of concern about runoff primarily to the west. What has become of that issue as this development has progressed? Any comments anybody has on that? Because I haven't heard much, if anything at all, about that recently.
I know, Councilman Vilhauer, that the developer had been working through that with the property owner to the west. It became a civil legal matter between those two entities. We were briefly brought into that. Matt maybe knows more than I do, but I don't believe we're part of those conversations now at this point, and they are working out or have worked out some agreements between the developer and the landowner to the west. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Matt.
No, I have nothing further to add.
Councilman Hoyer?
Heath, I think we talked about it last time, but could you just remind me, on 2nd Street Northwest, what was the decision that was made with the road there for curb and gutter? And then just, is it currently all paved there, or has that still gravel?
Yes, no, so this portion of Valley View, this whole subdivision is adjacent to the concrete street that the city constructed some years back. And so what this developer does is he pays his prorated share of that road for the construction that the city paid for back when it was built. So he'll simply reimburse us for what would have been a residential portion of that street cost. Now further north, up by River Ridge, is where we have the half-street configuration, and as those phases commence to build out further north, they'll continue to extend that half-street section as they plat adjacent to that roadway.
Perfect, thanks, Heath.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item E is the first reading of ordinance number 21-14, an ordinance amending numerous sections of the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown relating to the transition from a strong mayor to a council manager form of government. There's no motion on this. It's just the first reading, so I'll ask the City Attorney, Matt Roby, to tell us about this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As the council would recall, at the last meeting, the council approved Resolution 2122. That was essentially the culmination of some efforts of a subcommittee of the council to look at, maybe some different areas that maybe needed to be amended in the ordinance and some other issues concerning the transition to the council manager form of government. So one of those issues that was identified in the resolution was some amendments to the ordinance. Most of what you have in front of you here is simply logical cleanup, changing mayor to the word city manager, or to the two words city manager in those instances where the mayor is serving a administrative function. All the instances in the ordinance where the mayor is serving a mayoral function, of course, the word mayor will be left intact. There was also changes from the word mayor to the phrase public works director as it pertains to chapter 19, which is parking related determinations. It seemed that would be, the resolution stated that would be more appropriate to be a function of the public works director. And then finally, there was changes from council president to deputy mayor, as the position will now be called. And I did catch a couple instances where it mentioned the mayor and city council, where it was basically because the mayor will now be a member of the city council, that it would be essentially duplicitous to say those two words instead of just city council. The final piece of this will add a new rule to the council's codified rules, Rule 29, which would provide for that 10-day notice period for the mayor to provide the council and the city manager notice of appointees to any boards or commissions to which they get to, they're entitled to make appointments. So the council can have a notice there, a fair warning of those appointments. And then as I went through and identified those areas, there was a couple of other areas, a couple of other instances in the ordinance that I did identify that I will likely be bringing forward for consideration at the next council meeting. It might just require some more. It wasn't just a switch out a word here and there. It might require a little bit more discussion, and I'll give a heads up to the council on that as well. So.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Councilman Villar?
Just a comment. I want to thank our city attorney for this project. This was kind of foisted upon him a few months ago, and really appreciate the effort that you put into this, Matt, and the results that we're seeing now. So thank you.
True. Anyone else? All right, moving on to item F, which is also first reading. This one of ordinance number 21-15, an ordinance amending chapter 1.04 of the revised ordinances of the city of Watertown to allow temporary variations to regulations relating to businesses and lessees at the airport. And I'll again ask the city attorney, Matt Roby, to explain this to us.
Thank you, Mayor. Recently, there's been some discussions pertaining to a new potential business that would operate out of the airport with the airport board and the airport manager, myself, and the public works director. As those discussions took place, we were reviewing the ordinances, and our airport ordinances are very specific as to what different types of businesses are required to provide to operate at the airport. And nowhere in there was there the ability to deviate from those standards if the board and ultimately the council were to deem appropriate. So in many places in our ordinances, there's a kind of a variance procedure ability. So there's kind of two separate tracks going on here. We identified this as maybe something that needs to be inserted into our ordinance regardless of the outcome with this potential operator. And so we're moving forward with this proposal subject to some discussions that are occurring with the FAA to make sure that that they're okay with us adding something like this to our ordinance. And there's also some discussions on more substantively occurring with this potential operator with the airport board.
So any variance would be approved by the council ultimately, but allowed to exist for up to a year by the airport board before it goes to the council?
No, and if this needs to be reworded, by all means, no pride in authorship. Essentially, the way I envision this occurring with the airport board would grant the variation. They would be the first vetting body, and if they were to approve that, then it would come forward to the airport board first, and then the council in a contract or lease, depending on the situation, to be codified or memorialized in that agreement. But any such agreement arising out of that variation has to expire. It can't be longer than a year. So essentially, it would be for a temporary reason to deviate from the currently codified rules relating to airport businesses.
Okay.
If you look at Chapter 1, each there's a whole list of different types of businesses that may operate at our airport. And each one has kind of some pretty fine details about what the building size needs to be, about what the insurance coverage needs to be. And so for some reason that got codified many years ago. And there's nobody really knows exactly why it got so specific in the ordinance, but there is potentially some room there. There may come a time, maybe with this operator, maybe not, where the airport board says, you know, temporarily, it's probably okay if they do something a little different from that for whatever reason they decide is appropriate. So that's what's being proposed here as the first reading, of course. And again, discussions are continuing, but we wanted to just kind of get this on the radar. And if Heath has anything to add, or if Todd's on the line, I would defer to them as well.
Anything to add, Heath?
No, I think I'll just add briefly that Todd is working with the FAA to see what kind of latitude they would be agreeable with us implementing in this ordinance. So, for example, egg aerial applicator, aerial sprayer requires to have a fixed structure at the airport in order to operate as a in that capacity, along with the litany of other responsibilities and requirements. And the party of interest to operate something similar doesn't have that type of facility yet. So we're trying to figure out the level of latitude the FAA would be okay with us to have like a year-long window to plug somebody in on the airport, let them get their business up and running, operate temporarily in that capacity for up to a year, like Matt indicated. We wouldn't, staff at least isn't comfortable letting that extend indefinitely, but would give them time to at least get their feet on the ground and start to coordinate and put the pieces together to get the things that are otherwise required of the ordinance in place.
Yeah, I would just add one more piece to that. So specifically, that building requirement is kind of what we're looking at here. And one of the struggles I would say is that, you know, the airport has a capital improvement plan over the next 10 years, and there may be an area of the airport that's not properly served, or it's not currently served by public infrastructure to allow for you know, proliferation of buildings out there. And so it's trying to find a way to potentially allow a business to operate without a building until we can get the proper public infrastructure to serve a new area of the airport to allow that building to go. So again, there's a lot of discussions going on still. There still needs to be some FAA checkoffs as to whether or not this would be an appropriate addition to our ordinance, but we wanted to just get it on for first reading, and then assuming we get the right checkoffs, it will come back for a second reading.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to item G, which is renewal of alcoholic beverage licenses for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. I have a motion by Lallam and a second by Albertson, and I'll ask the finance officer, Kristen Bobzien, to tell us about this, please.
Thank you, Mayor. These renewals are actually some, we were waiting on a few applications to get turned in. I think the last meeting we had a really large group of them, so these are a few of the last ones to do. This will renew everyone's malt beverage and SD Farm wine license. So if there's any questions, I can try to answer them.
All right, thank you. Any questions, council? Not seeing any questions, so I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item H is the presentation of the preliminary 2020 financial report, and I'll call upon the finance officer, Kristen Bobzien, to give it to us. Do we need to approve it, Kristen?
Nope, it's just a kind of a run through of what 2020 looked like. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll start with the governmental funds. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to point out a few areas that I think are important, kind of some significant changes. If there's questions, I can answer them. This is a pre-audit report. It's just the preliminary. We are currently going through our audit, and then we will produce the full CAFR. So this is just to hit a few of the high points. So as we know, 2020 kind of threw us for a little bit of a loop with the pandemic. I will say that I will point the council and the public to more towards the bottom. There is the decrease in the fund balance. That's the really, truly important number to look at. So when we look at the general fund, we increased our fund balance by a little over $4 million. I will say that a significant portion of that was due to the COVID relief fund dollars that we received. The city did take in around $5.4 million for the COVID relief fund. So that created a significant increase, not only in the general fund, but also in the E911 fund, which is considered some of the other governmental funds. So if we stick with the general fund right away, sales tax increased by 2.4%, around $189,000 for the year. It is not what we budgeted to happen in 2020. I think we were budgeting around a 4% increase, but I will say that with what 2020 brought us, I think a 2.4 is a very solid number. Our revenues in total increased by $5.3 million, about a 34% increase. There again, the majority of that is from the COVID relief fund dollars that we received. Expenditures also increased around $785,000 for a 5.1% increase. The majority of that was due to the implementation of the wage study, along with one additional staff for the operating of the general fund. If we go over to the capital improvement fund, the sales tax mirrors whatever the general fund, capital improvement fund did that as well. So a 2.4% increase when it comes to the sales tax. Total revenues increased by about $902,000 for 9.1% increase. The majority of this was due to, we did receive the large $1 million donation for the zoo building, which was paid for out of the capital improvement fund. So that's where that revenue came from. On the capital improvement side, for that fund, our expenditures did increase by $3.1 million for a total of 44%. I know that seems high. I did want to explain some of that. When you actually take into consideration that we did our refunding, part of the refunding required us to pay back, not pay back, but essentially close out we had a debt service reserve fund. And when we were able to refund and get rid of that, it took away the requirement, but we did pay out $2.6 million to do that refunding. It's cash we had, it was already set aside to do that, but it was a requirement to do the refunding. I do want to hit quick on the refunding. That was something that we did a lot of in 2020. When we refunded our sales tax bonds, we saved $3.7 million, which was around $293,000 annually. So that was a huge savings when we did the refunding. Our water department, I know it's kind of switching to the enterprise, but I'll just hit on all the refunding that we did. The water department also did a refunding, and they were able to save $665,000, about $82,000 annually. And then our wastewater fund did the same thing. They refunded, saved $510,000, around $46,000 annually. So doing all those refundings, even though they're quite a bit of work, when you see that amount of savings, it's well worth it. When we look at the other governmental funds, that incorporates a lot of our special revenue funds, Park and Rec, the BBB, Prairie Lakes Wellness, E911. I'm not going to touch on everything in them, but there are a few that I'd like to point out. The Park and Recreation did increase its fund balance by $365,000. A lot of that was due, I think, primarily that the pool was not open. So we also didn't have a lot of expenditure on that side. And then of course that was helped because we didn't also have the revenue and the expenditure. The Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, that fund did take a significant hit due to COVID. Our change in fund balance was a decrease of $210,000. I'm not surprised to see that. The wellness center was shut down for a couple months, but even with the shutdown, that facility still has quite a bit of operating expense from utilities and kind of keeping the pool. Everything can't exactly shut down there. So I wasn't surprised to see that. So hopefully here in 2021, back open fully, and we can see those revenues kind of pick back up and work towards building back that fund balance. The only other thing I think that I can say, when we talked a little bit about the grants, I touched on we took in about $5.4 million in the COVID relief fund. The airport also had a significant increase in grants. It took in $4.7 million worth of grants. So total, the finance department kind of kept track of a little over $11 million worth of federal funding that we received in 2020. So significant tracking and kind of keeping records of that. If we do switch over to the enterprise funds, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I will say that every fund except for the airport fund did have an operating income. None of them had a loss except for the airport fund. Not super significant in every fund, but they did all kind of build themselves up. I will say that the solid waste department did well. A strong year for them. Part of that was due to the fact that we did increase those rates, which is what we needed. That rate study really did help us identify that we need to build back some of that cash. There's some more landfill cell projects that will be coming forward, so hopefully we can, like I said, keep building up on that cash. The airport fund did have a loss, which I will say is not really a change from any other year. Part of that is a little bit of the timing when they have these large projects. A lot of times they're expending before we're receiving any of the grant dollars in. So some of it can just be based off a little bit of the timing issue. Other than that, there's not too much else that I think I need to touch on, but I do want to give a quick thank you though to the finance staff. We were running short-staffed as well during 2020, dealing with the pandemic, tracking $11 million worth of federal funding. So I have to give kudos and thanks to my staff for keep paying the bills and keep the money coming in. So I can take any questions.
Thank you, Kristen. Councilman Vilhauer?
Kristen, looking at the general fund, I assume the intergovernmental figure of 6.2 million, that's where the COVID, the 5.4 COVID money went into?
That's correct.
Now, did we get that actual 5.4 in cash by the end of 2020, or did you just book the receivable? Or
I only had the December accrual, so we had everything except for about, I think I accrued around $450,000.
Okay.
So.
Now this isn't a fair question to ask, but I'll ask it anyway. A few weeks ago, the public opinion, I forget where the source was, but they had talked about the dollars coming through from the most recent, the American Rescue Plan. And there were some large dollars that were reported as coming through to the county and the cities again from that plan. Do you have any sense, have you got anything from your sources as far as what we can anticipate from that stimulus package?
So I did go out and look at the South Dakota, it's the Bureau of Financial Management, and they did put out some preliminary numbers. There again, a lot of that's based off of your size of your county and how they're kind of strategically. From what I can tell when I looked at their spreadsheets that they put out on their website, it looks like Watertown is looking at about $3.7 million. Now, I think that's all preliminary, nothing's official, but that's kind of what they have us tagged at.
Was Cottington County broken out separately then, or was that the county and the city?
Yep, they broke everything out separately. So they kind of did it by how much the states were getting, and then they did it by the county, and then they did it by the municipalities.
Okay.
So.
Sounds good, thanks.
Yep.
Awesome. Councilman Roby?
Thank you, Mayor. Kristen, a question I kind of picked up in the public, it's a real high level question, and that is, we got all of these excess funds, in this case, $5.4 million in 2020. Without that, how do we balance our books? In other words, I think there's a perception with some I picked up that we got all this money that came in and all of a sudden it's gone next year. We must not be in great shape for 2021. Would you explain that out?
So when we did our budget for 2021, we did anticipate using around $3 million of the COVID relief to kind of offset what we're doing in 2021. So I would say it still leaves about $2 million of cash kind of left on the table. which is good because as we know, projects and expenses kind of come up. But no, I think for going through a pandemic, I think the city of Watertown fared well. The grant funding helped us out a lot, but even without that, I think there again, we were proactive. We kind of stopped some of our expenditures. We stopped some of our capital purchases until we kind of knew how sales tax was coming in. I think that was an appropriate way to do it because there again, we budgeted for a 4% sales tax and only took in 2.4% of an increase. So all in all, I think we're sitting okay. There again, when we budgeted for 21, we knew what we were looking at for the COVID relief fund, but we did not spend it all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor?
Councilman Albertson. I'll get you.
Just to add to what Kristen said, I think there's also $200 million coming in that's specific, not to Watertown now, but to the state, that's meant for library funds. And so I'll be interested in our library meeting tomorrow to see what's happening with that as far as Watertown is concerned, because it's $200 million divided by the libraries in the state. I think that's the number. So hopefully we'll have some positives out of that also.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to say thank you to your staff as well as you, Kristen. Thanks for all the good work you've done and managing that team to get these things done. Thanks.
Yeah, it was kind of a crazy year, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Item I is appointment of Sheila Brettschneider as interim Human Resources Director effective May 6, 2021 until the position is filled.
Second.
Got it. Can you raise a hand over there? Was it Vilhauer? Vilhauer and Rademski. And I'll just explain this. Our Human Resource Director, Jelaine Pifley, has resigned. Her last day is May 5th, and that's Wednesday. And so she has a subordinate, Sheila Brettschneider. Sheila's been with the city for many years, and she does the payroll, but she's very familiar with all of the human resource functions that go on. And so I'm recommending to appoint her as our interim Human Resources Director so we can keep on with our HR processes while we look for a replacement. So any questions? Councilman Lallam?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. I mean, she's been the assistant essentially for Jelaine. Does she have HR experience? I mean, is there going to be an issue on that if there's something that comes up as far as a employee issue? Or are we going to have to go to outside
we have
counsel?
Kristen Bobzine and Chris Gottschalk have both done HR functions as well. So okay. I think we're covered pretty well.
Okay.
But if we have to, we can reach outward if we get in a pinch.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Albertson?
Thank you, Mayor. What's the timeline on firing and finding a new HR person?
Well, the 2-week period closed today at 5, and we have a number of resumes that will be, and applications we'll be reviewing tomorrow to see if we have a sufficient pool to do interviews. So it could go fast if we got, right, it could be. Yep. You're welcome. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item J is authorization for the mayor to sign a contract with Geotech Engineering and Testing Services, Inc. in the amount of $17,523.50 for asbestos survey and management in conjunction with the City Hall renovation project. I have a motion by Rademski and a second by Holeen, and I will just explain this. We've encountered some asbestos in the City Hall building, and this contract is to manage the removal properly, and not to actually do the removal of it, but to investigate and know exactly where we have it now that we know what's going to be disturbed. They'll come up with a plan for managing the removals and disturbance, and so that we do it properly. And we do expect that the contractor will have to deal with this, and our architect was not the right firm to do this management work. They thought this is probably the maximum that it would cost. We'll be paying hourly based on what they find, and it shouldn't go higher than this, but it might be significantly less if we're lucky. So, does anybody have any questions? Councilman Villar?
Not a question on this, and maybe we should take action on, in fact, why don't we take action on this first? But I do have a question after this then.
Okay. Anybody else have a question or comment about the asbestos management? Councilman Lallam?
On this particular one, is there not a local person that does this? I mean,
It's
I know
pretty
these-
specialized, right? And this was a company that was recommended by our architect for having done this type of work. I don't know that there's anybody local that does it.
Okay.
We leaned on them for their recommendation.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right, look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, Councilman Villar?
Could you just give a real brief update? I mean, I know a few of us are around here are on this committee, but just a real brief update as far as where we are in the timeline or the whole process is in the City Hall renovation project.
Okay, sure. So we've gotten through the questioning period where the architect picks our brains to figure out what we want and figure out our flow and the layout and what we'll do for the various different systems throughout. And they'll be putting together construction drawings now. So they're entering the construction drawing phase. That will end with bidding. So we expect this could take up to 6 weeks to create the construction drawings. And then we'll advertise for bids and hope for the best. So any questions about that or comments?
It's
Yeah.
moving forward. I know it seems like it's going slow, but it is moving forward.
Yeah, it is good to get to this point. That's a lot of work. Okay, and item K is authorization for the mayor to sign an MOU with the mass vaccination event consultant to pay for their services, with the understanding that the city will seek reimbursement from the state through Prairie Lakes Healthcare System. Have a motion by Lallam.
Second.
And a second, I think that was Bueller. Was it Bueller? Had it stereo coming from both directions. And I have the Assistant Fire Chief, Don Rowland, who served as an incident commander on the task force here for the pod events to help me get through this. And I will ask Don to please explain what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and members of council. Just so you remember, back in December, we had a pod consultant. She was our agency representative that helped us with our pod planning. Historically, we've been doing this for many years. I think most of you guys are aware that we've been doing this since 2005 or better. She's kind of been hired by the county as a facilitator for the last 5 to 6 years as a planner. Well, in December, they put that application in, the county did, and the state returned it back to them and didn't fund it. So basically what happened in January, I think the mayor shared some information with you that we needed to have a pod facilitator, or we call her the agency representative in the incident command system. And what she does is she's in charge of all the pre-planning of the meetings, scheduling of the meetings, doing the pod plan, identifying the annexes that need to be identified, and basically addendums where we continue to look through these every planning meeting. Well, once we started the mass vaccination events, she got going more thoroughly, and she put together a consultant proposal that was going to work through the city, the county, and Prairie Lakes Hospital. So the cost of this proposal is right at $20,000. So essentially, we don't have it basically signed in a contract or anything like that. It was just a proposal. And what we did is we were hoping for the state to be able to come back with some funds to help take care of this. As of right now, Prairie Lakes Hospital is the one that's facilitating all bills for mass vaccination events. And they currently take care of 4 other cities, which is Brookings, Huron, and Madison, I believe. And so they're part of the Northern Plains Health Alert Network. And basically, in a nutshell, they provide those cities to the state with a capped amount of funds that are coming in from the state, from the Department of Health. At this time, those funds are capped, but that doesn't mean this bill, this invoice that we received from the consultant, won't get paid at a later date. So what we're trying to do is facilitate and try to get her paid and move forward with this project. I do know that Prairie Lakes has made notification to myself as well as the mayor to make sure that this gets done. And at this time, informally, all 3 parties are agreeing to pay basically equally. So with that, I'd take any questions.
It's more complicated than we thought it was going to be. What we discovered was that the county normally would cover the cost of pod planning and be paid by the state to cover those costs, and that's not how the state's doing it this time. We can't be reimbursed by the state. The state will only reimburse the hospital. So for whatever reason, the hospital's asking us to pay the bill and bill them. They'll reimburse us and submit for reimbursement through the state, and apologize for how complex that is.
And one thing I'll add too, I did visit with some Department of Health representation. She stated very clearly, these are reimbursable expenses. When we get the funds, we don't know. And I think even Glenn alluded to the $3.7 million that came from the American Recovery Stimulus Act. There's $15 million that are being allocated to the state of South Dakota for mass vaccination events. So I think most would agree that these vaccinations are not going to stop. We're going to continue to do these. I don't know if you guys know that on Thursday we're actually going to do a 7 to 9 first-time dose again. So if anybody's got family or friends that are interested, we're going to do that at the Extension Building again. So,
Councilman Villar?
Don, did I hear you say that the county is going through the exact same hoops on this as we are?
yes, I believe that tomorrow it's going to be on their commissioner's agenda as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilman Lallam?
Don, on that, you said Thursday, 7 to 9?
Yep, 7 to 9.
Anyone over 16, is that what they're
Correct.
going with now?
And I believe that it'll be another one the next week on May 13th. So Thursday's the 6th and Thursday the 13th of the following week. That'll be 7 to 9 first doses again.
And we just haven't had great turnout on those. I mean,
well, we
not
did.
bad,
We had some really great turnouts in that first and second one. And I think, Prairie Lakes did such a great job right out of the gate, doing so many vaccinations that we got a lot of folks. I believe that 65 and above, we're sitting at almost 87% of the folks that have gotten a first dose of vaccine, actually second dose as well. So right now, I believe we're close to 11,000 people in our county that have gotten 1 dose. So we're getting close to that 55+% range, as well as the state numbers right on the 55% that's gotten that 1 dose. So that stated, I think we're getting closer to getting back to some normalcy this summer.
So if people are looking for their vaccine, that's their chance.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Roby?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I heard that this is about $20,000. The information in the packet is basically one line. Is this memorandum of understanding going to state a specific number? That's my first question. The second question is, I thought I heard that number will get reimbursed. Did I hear that correctly?
That's the issue, is that we anticipate, but the state's not guaranteeing it. They're saying this is a reimbursable expense, but only the hospital can request it, and they may not be reimbursed for everything they ask. They don't know. So I can't tell you for sure that we'll be guaranteed to be reimbursed for it. So it's kind of the person that's done the planning hasn't been paid, and she's done a lot of work, and we're uncomfortable with that. So we want to be acting in good faith to make sure that people are treated fairly, But we also understand clearly from the state, this is a reimbursable expense. But only the hospital can ask for reimbursement. So we're going through weird gyrations. The hospital has expended a great deal of money to make this happen as well. And they aren't being reimbursed for all of their expenses. And so that's why they're asking us.
Okay, and then back to my, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the answer. The first question then is the MOU going to specify an amount?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
And that's going to be $20,000, or you're saying very close to that? So how are we going to vote for this? Not to exceed? What's our motion going to look like?
Well, it's $20,000 that we will pay, and then we will seek reimbursement and cost sharing from others. But we haven't gotten a promise from anybody else that they'll, they're saying, yes, they're interested, but nobody's like guaranteeing they're going to pay it. And meanwhile, the person's out there in the cold. Is that making sense? I don't know if I'm answering your question.
I think John.
Well, the question is this: what is the MOU? I assume has some outs into it. That's not a firm contract. That's a memorandum of understanding. But if you're going to put a number in there, is it going to say approximately? I'm just curious how the number. Are we going to put a maximum in there?
We'll max out at 20,000, Don.
Thank you.
And one other thing I'll add: the county has got a lot of work into this as well. Not only from representation from the county employees, but they're using the county extension building, and there's a lot of costs that are associated with that as well. And my thanks to those folks, as well as Prairie Lakes Hospital, Lake Erie Tech College. We have a lot of volunteers that have been doing this as well. So we're talking about 50 people at a time. Sometimes we were doing 1,000+ doses at a shot, and I think some of you have been out there and seen how smoothly that organization's been running. So. Thanks to a lot of the folks.
Right, and it is a little messy. It's not gone exactly how we would want it to go in a perfect world, but we felt like we couldn't wait around for guarantees from the state that they're going to give us 100% coverage on this. Meanwhile, we've got a raging pandemic and vaccine available, and we wanted to be able to distribute it properly to our community, and I think we've done a really good job with that. The pods or the points of dispensing have been run very smoothly and met the need for our community.
In my understanding, as the CDC identifies the younger kids, that age classification of 16 and under, there's going to be another probably mass vaccination event before school starts again next year. So we'll probably using the same type of folks in this pod setting.
And this pod contract goes through the end of this year.
December 31st, yeah.
Yeah. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thanks, Don.
Thanks. Yep.
Okay, item L is request for proposals for the multi-purpose arena. And the motion, I should read that. It's on page. Authorization to draft and advertise an RFP for management services relating to the multi-purpose ice arena. Have a motion by Lallam and a second by Bueller. And Councilman Holeen will be presenting this.
Thank you, Council, for your consideration of this tonight. If you will remember, the facility manager, which is what we're talking about tonight, was something that was proposed during the multipurpose ice presentation over a month ago when we voted on this. It was an idea that we had learned that other communities have done, where you hire a facility manager to handle the operations and maintenance of a facility. They in turn reap some of the profits, and what usually results for the taxpayer is a better run facility that limits the exposure to taxpayers. So better run facility, lower cost to the taxpayers is what we're hoping for here. Of course, we can't guarantee that until we actually get a proposal brought forth to us from a facility manager. We have reasonable confidence that a proposal will come to us. I have already talked to 2 interested parties. I can't guarantee anything, but the idea here is to advertise that we are open to consideration for a proposal for facility manager and see what we get back. This will not lock us into anything. That's why this description here, and Matt and Kristen will see to it that the short description that I handed out will be placed upon the city minutes so that any interested party can read further about it. But it's just so that interested parties can contact us, find out more what we're looking for, and in turn, we will find out more what we're looking for. We feel that this is an important step. We feel this is the time to do it because there are a lot of considerations. We would like the input of a facility manager at least to offer ideas in the design of the ice facility. We are getting very close to finalizing the architectural design. We want their input on like the size of the steps, you know, or the alley or the pathways where customers and people who go to attend these events, how much space they need to walk down the aisles and buy tickets, and just the flow of customers, the flow of the audience. And also we would like their input into negotiations for a potential junior team and sponsorship dollars. We would just like their input. We don't know exactly what we're going to get, but this allows us to take the first step and at least start fielding some proposals from possible facility managers. So I would urge your positive affirmation on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilman Billhauer?
Councilman Holeen, I understand you're the primary author of this document. Is that correct? I mean, you did run it by our city attorney.
I did.
Any concerns, Matt?
Well, I just glanced at it this morning, and I haven't had a chance to look at it real closely. I guess my understanding of tonight's action was kind of an authorization for the general idea of going out for a request, and then Kristen and I and whoever else potentially would be involved would fine-tune it, get it out there. I guess the one question I would have is what kind of a turnaround you're hoping for on this. Maybe that could be part of the motion potentially, but yeah, I guess I was expecting to drill down into some of the details after the positive response tonight to go out for an RFP.
And that's what I was intending as well. I believe while I like moving fast, I think probably the first meeting in June is a very realistic deadline for when we should close it and open it up for considerations for the bids that we receive. Hopefully we receive multiple ones and we can choose the one that we like the best.
Okay, Councilman Hoyer.
First off, Councilman Holeen, thank you for all the work you're doing on this. Just for clarification, when you're saying we, that's referring to the ICE board, and then as you've been discussing, you said you had two that you had talked to. Has the city attorney been like privy to those conversations as well, or are you just looking for interest as of right now?
I have had no negotiations with any entity regarding what a contract will look like. All I have done is I have expressed the desire that I believe the city of Watertown would be willing and interested into entering into an agreement with a facility manager. I have done no negotiations as to what that contract will look like. I have some ideas based upon my research what I think it will look like, but I do not want to speak for any proposal, any facility manager, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the city council on this.
For sure. I just was curious where we're in the process, because if Matt was on that too, then yeah.
And Matt is aware of the two entities that have at least expressed interest.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
Councilman, I will say to the whole council, I don't know if Councilman Holeen mentioned this, but technically this is in my opinion, I've consulted with other communities that have had a similar type of a contract, that this would qualify as a professional services contract. There's an exception to the proposal bid requirements for professional services contracts. So in theory, we could just straight out negotiate with our preferred vendor. But it's the ICE committee's desire to have a more open RFP process. And I think that, this would be, the idea is to get somebody on board early in the process, but any contract that would be drafted would not take any legal effect until, because there's a couple other things that probably need to fall into place first before this would be in effect going forward. And so we wouldn't be obligated to them, I guess, in my mind, until we're for sure going to build the ice at the place we're going to build the ice. And because there's a couple other legal contracts that would need to be solidified before that were to move forward.
So when you said the deadline of June, the first meeting in June, do you mean of receipt of proposals or action on accepting a proposal and making a contract?
I would say I would expect proposals by then, and I would hope that the council could at least start taking a first reading at the first meeting in June.
Okay. Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. First off, thanks, Reed, again, for all the work you've done with this. Will we have an opportunity as an ICE committee to kind of look at this more in detail, maybe make some adjustments if necessary? I do have a few concerns. I'm not going to get into those tonight. But that, I think that would be good. I think it might be, I'm kind of thinking it might be good to get the Park and Rec, you know, like Terry Kelly, just have him in the mix a little bit so he sees what's going on here. I think that would be helpful for what, you know, they may have some questions as to who's going to take care of what. I have had those concerns, those questions at Park and Rec Board meetings, and, you know, who's going to take care of the ice. I know that it says they will in there, but there's large maintenance. There's a number of other things, I think, for consideration, but I think we ought to get them involved, and I think it'd be nice just to, if you'd be okay with that, for our group to meet again, just to look at a little more of the detail on this.
Oh, I'd be more than okay with that. I'd be totally in favor of that. Not just the ICE committee, but the full council as well, to be appraised of it. Obviously, some of the harder core discussion can be occurring at the committee level, but that is how committees are designed, to do a lot of the grunt work so that the rest of the council can focus upon committees and priorities that they have, is to save time and bring forward a proposal. But yes, that is the idea. And in my first drafting of this, I actually did specify the Parks and Rec cooperation and contribution in this. And then I finally thought that it would be redundant to say Parks and Rec and the City of Watertown, because Parks and Rec is technically an entity of the City of Watertown. So I just chose City of Watertown.
Thanks, Reed.
Anyone else?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
since we're throwing out ideas, I thought I'd add one to the mix. And I don't know what the RFP reads, but if it doesn't include a requirement for a statement of qualifications, I would encourage to have that in there, just because it is professional services that Matt alluded to, and we are able to not be bound by the bid laws, but rather qualification-based selection. Knowing the importance of this role that it will play with the ICE facility's success, I would just encourage us to look at it from a high level of qualifications-based standards throughout the process is what I would encourage, for whatever that's worth.
Excellent suggestion. Anyone else? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the 5G from the consent agenda that was moved. Authorization for the mayor to sign the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act grant in the amount of $1,003,968 for the Watertown Regional Airport. Motion by Lallam and second by Albertson. And I will ask the Public Works Director, City Engineer Heath Von Eye to tell us about this.
Thank you, Mayor. If the council could recall, this was before them, it's probably been a month ago now, and we withdrew it for specific intentions to do a little further research on how the funds could be utilized and maybe targeting the funds towards a specific type of cleaning instrumentation that was being explored by the airport. What this is really the second wave of grant money that was allocated towards airports. We have been earmarked an amount of just over $1 million for this this wave of grants. This grant money is specific to be used for operations, personnel, cleaning, sanitation, janitorial services, and things of that nature. So it's a perhaps a little more confined of intent of its use than the last round of stimulus or revitalization money that we received. With that, this is the protocol to go ahead and sign and return the application for this federal assistance. I believe this, we had till I believe June sometime to return this to the FAA, so we were able to do that research on that cleaning equipment. Based on Todd's research with that, he was not looking at necessarily pulling the trigger on that cleaning equipment, but he also found out that we can execute this grant and don't have to do another subsequent or different tract if we were going to spend this money on that. So we were comfortable bringing it back to the council for formal approval to get it submitted to the FAA. And Todd Syrie, the airport manager, is online, and he and I can stand by for any questions.
All right, thank you. Councilman Villar?
A couple of questions, Heath or Todd. First of all, do we get the grant and then have to show how we use it, or do we have to incur the expense first and then apply for reimbursement?
Todd, can I defer to you on that one?
Absolutely. Thanks, Heath. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we will get the grant, and then it will be processed through the finance office. And this was some of the paperwork she was speaking of earlier for reimbursement. And so operations, maintenance, cleaning, sanitization, any of those aspects of the airport budget will then be sent into the state for reimbursement. So it'll be no different in that aspect from the CARES Act grant we had received last year.
Okay, thanks, Todd. And then also, how long do we have to use this?
We have 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 9 is old business. Do we have some old business? Councilman Albertson?
It's really not old business, except we had talked about it earlier. Dee Dee Whitman from the library said the amount was $2.2 million that we have for library funds coming into the state. That was her exact number, she said, so.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily for Watertown, for the state.
Okay. Any other old business? Okay, then we'll move on to new business, and we do have one piece of new business. The city attorney is going to tell us about a marijuana template that we're getting from Municipal League, I think.
So, yeah, thank you, Mayor. Hot off the presses this morning, there was there's been some ongoing discussions amongst attorneys, planners, and Municipal League, managers, administrators around the state. There's a group that's been kind of discussing a way forward on medical marijuana. Recreational, of course, is in front of the Supreme Court. As it stands today, it was struck down by the district court in Pierre, the circuit court. If the Supreme Court agrees with the circuit court, recreational will not be going forward. But medicinal is set to go live on July 1st. And so the kind of where the group landed for the short term here was a proposed ordinance that was drafted largely by Jack Heeb and Zach up in Aberdeen, who do a lot of consulting and do a lot of work on behalf of the Municipal League and the Public Assurance Alliance. And essentially what this would do, it would be kind of a short-term emergency fix, or more emergency effort to preserve the status quo until the state implements their rules. The state has until October 29th of this year to promulgate rules related to the licensing of dispensaries in the state of South Dakota. And so essentially what this ordinance would do is say any applications we receive before the state promulgates rules will be denied. It will not be pending, will be denied. And if we pass that, it will in turn then buy us time to craft a permanent fix to, or permanent solution as to how we want to deal with, with medical marijuana as a community. So the first step in that process will be to bring this temporary, we'll have to tweak it to Watertown's, with Watertown language and, put in City of Watertown, of course, it's just a template. But the first step in that process would be to go before the Plan Commission at the second meeting of May, then the council meeting at the first meeting of June, second meeting of June, second reading, and it's an emergency ordinance, so it would go into effect immediately. So that would be the potential first step. Now the caveat to that is if we as a community decide that we don't want to regulate medicinal marijuana at all, just let the state license it and let all comers come, we wouldn't even have to undertake this temporary ordinance and would not have to undertake any sort of permanent ordinance. So there needs to be a community discussion pretty urgently here as to how we want to regulate medical marijuana going forward. There's two ways that we can regulate it. One is through a time, place, and manner function through our zoning ordinances. We can identify zones and areas of town where we deem it appropriate for a dispensary or a growing operation to exist, and put potential conditions or performance standards on those locations. And two, we can implement a licensing scheme. The way the law reads currently, it gives us very little ability to do much more than charge a reasonable fee and require a license. The state presumably is going to have a pretty rigorous licensing process. They're likely going to include financial guarantees of some sort or financial fitness of some sort, tests, criminal background checks, that sort of thing. So the state is going to promulgate the rules for licensing that are presumably, given this administration's general opposition to the idea, presumably going to be very stringent. So again, there's two paths there. One, a license with a reasonable fee, and then a zoning fix. The last piece of that is we can't say zero. We can't say there can be 0 dispensaries in our town. The law states that we have to allow at least one. But the law also states that you can set a maximum number. And so that's the other piece to this, where you could come up with a scheme based on population or however we decide to maybe do that, or just pick a number. You can set a number and say 5 or 4 or 6 or whatever. For context, on sale alcoholic beverage licenses, there's 1 per 1,500 people of population, for example, in state law. So anyway, that's kind of where things stand today. I guess the takeaway is, one, we have a temporary ordinance that can go into effect, keep the status quo intact until we can formulate a permanent plan, and then two, we need to come up with a permanent plan as a community and get it implemented by by probably the end of October. The state could get the rules done quicker, but not likely because they're under the gun too. So more than likely we have till the end of October to come up with our permanent plan and get it enacted into ordinance.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilman Bueller?
Don't mean to ambush you with this one, Matt, but in my effort to run for council and getting my petition signatures, that's is sort of a hot issue. And one of the questions a lot of folks had, and I think I understand, and I tried to answer this as best I could, but the reason that this amendment has been challenged, can you explain that a little bit? Because it seems like there's a lot of folks out there that don't understand that, or that this was an amendment to the state constitution.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here was called IM 26, and that was a initiated measure that placed medicinal marijuana into state statute. But what you're talking about was the
recreational.
Correct. Was Amendment A, which provided for recreational marijuana and purported to enact it into our state constitution. So the legal issue, just 10,000 foot view, and if Vince Foley's watching, you can call in and let us know what he thinks. But 10,000 foot view, there's two issues. One is called the single subject rule, and actually we have the same rule for local ordinances, that you can't pass an ordinance that contains more than one subject. And now there's different interpretation of what that means. Generally, it's applied pretty liberally, and so the proponents of Amendment A, in their minds, they're saying the one subject is marijuana. The opponents are saying no, there's marijuana, there's medicinal marijuana, there's hemp, there's all these regulations that the Department of Revenue has to enact. So there's multiple subjects. So that's one issue. And then the second issue is amendment versus revision. So there's a mechanism for amending the Constitution. There's also there's a mechanism for revising the Constitution. A revision to the Constitution requires a constitutional convention. And so the opponents are saying this is so comprehensive that this should be considered a revision, and therefore it's not appropriate that it should be voted on by the people. It should be enacted by a constitutional convention. So if the Supreme Court agrees with one of those two arguments, it'll remain struck down. And, the legislature, sounds like there's some folks in the legislature that want to give a little bit on it. There's some back and forth with the administration on that. And if it gets shot down, presumably that group's going to try to get it back on the ballot again in some other form, I would suspect, in the next few years. So,
And just another quick question for you. Is it going to be the burden of the state to regulate this? If we allow licenses, are we going to have to renew those on an annual basis like we do liquor right now?
yeah, I think that would be, so one thing we could do as a community, we could just say, we'll have zoning, we won't have licensing. The state's got a licensing mechanism. We'll have zoning, but we're just gonna leave the licensing alone. I think there's probably some merit in having a license, getting a reasonable fee out of the applicants for some of the administrative costs we're gonna have to incur. So I would be an advocate for something like that. And if we do that, it would be a renewal, just like, I would envision it being a renewal just like our alcoholic beverage licenses. So, right now the state's fee can be no more than $5,000. The city's fees can be reasonable. So, whatever that means, presumably a court would say if the state can only be $5,000, our reasonable fee is likely going to have to be less than that. Right now, our alcoholic beverage licenses are $1,500 a year to renew. So that would be kind of a natural comparison, perhaps. But that's where, it would be up to us whether or not we wanted to make that renewable on an annual basis or a one-time deal.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Councilman Villar?
Matt, did I hear you say that at our May 17th meeting, we're looking at addressing or taking a look at the template legislation or ordinance?
The timeline right now, we just got this morning, and the timeline would be Plan Commission, because it's a planning function as well. So it puts a halt on permits from a planning perspective as well as a licensing perspective. So the Plan Commission would have to approve it first, and then it would come to the council at the first meeting of June.
Okay.
But I'm happy to circulate this as soon as we have it formatted for the city.
Just a suggestion as we go through this process. Representative Hugh Bartle, as I understand, is a co-chair or some high-level position within a legislative committee looking at this. Might not be a bad idea to reach out to him and have him be in attendance whenever we do start discussing this.
That's a good idea. Should invite him. Councilman Lallam?
Matt, if you could send that out once you get that too, just so we have a chance to look that over before it, nothing against the planning and zoning either, but just so we're aware of what it is.
Well, and you're all welcome to come to the
yeah, I'm sure.
Plan Commission meeting.
But just so we can see the actual, what the state is looking at.
Yeah, I'll just forward it right now. I'll forward it tonight.
Thank you.
Good deal. All right. Anyone else?
Oh, no.
Got some other new business? Councilman Hoyer?
Just something that kind of came up when we had to talk about litter, but one, I absolutely love all the development and construction that's happening downtown. However, we're having some issues with littering that's blowing through the downtown. For those businesses that are down here, I know that we had some artificial snow from styrofoam for a while, and it's not actually artificial. I'm being funny there, but it's a lot of trash that's blowing around right now, and it's construction materials. And I don't know if there's any measures we can take or just politely ask, please police your trash a little bit better. But it's getting a little bit out of hand in the downtown with just plastic wrappings, pieces of insulation foam, and things like of that nature that are just blown all over the place. So if we can get a handle on that, that's going to be a little less stress on our street cleaning teams, and then just people getting it in their yard at this point.
Right. Actually, I did receive a complaint, and I asked the building inspector and the code enforcement officer to cruise around and look at the construction sites and make sure that their practices are, I'm sure they're not doing it on purpose, but they're outside and they're working, they have garbage, they set their pop bottle down and it's kind of empty and it blows away. That's how it happens, and it'll all be buttoned up one day.
Right, it's that, but it's literally like the packing materials of their
Yeah.
supplies and
Yeah.
stuff. That's kind of the bigger thing right now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Is there any other new business? None? Okay, are there any liaison member reports? Councilman Billhauer?
At last week's municipal water to municipal utilities board meeting, it was announced that we went through our normal annual EPA analysis of our water here in Watertown, and there were no issues found from the EPA's perspective. So that's good news for our drinking water supply.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Any announcements? Okay, item 13 is executive session pursuant to SDCL-1-25-2, and we will have an executive session this evening in order to discuss and consult with legal counsel on contractual and personnel matters. We will not be taking action upon coming out, so I need a motion
Mayor,
to go in.
I believe Councilman Roby has
Councilman-
something to say.
Councilman Roby?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make the comment that last December, I sent an email to the mayor and the council expressing my frustration and concern on what I think is our overuse of executive session. In that email, I stated a statistic. I went through the minutes of all the meetings in 2020, and in our council meetings, we were in executive session 70% of the time. And I've checked with other cities and other bodies, and that is, in my mind, really an overuse of executive session. It's a big concern of mine. I don't think it's a good way to do government. And my question is simply, my understanding, we may have 2 executive sessions tonight. Are these absolutely necessary?
They are, and I want to just make a point that we do not take executive session lightly. Everything that we've gone into executive session for is appropriate to be done in executive session. We did a wage study, that kind of stuff with personnel matters. You just don't talk about those out in the open. And we've had a great deal of economic development and lots of discussion there in general. Those are very appropriately handled in executive session. Just look around our town. We've got a lot going on. And there's never any action taken in executive session. Absolutely everything is explained and put on an agenda for people to see in advance, ask questions, come testify, come ask questions at a council meeting, and thoroughly understand before the council takes action. So it isn't casual. We're not taking this casually.
Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, Councilman Roby.
Thank you. I don't think that's okay. I think 70% it's an abuse of executive session. And I wasn't planning on making any speeches tonight. I just think we can't run the city where we're in an executive session that often. I think it's a bad way to govern the city. I'll end with that.
Okay, thank you. And yeah. We do get requests for executive session constantly. I turn them down regularly. And unless there is an actual economic development plan with specifics on it, we don't talk about those things behind closed doors.
Mayor?
So, yes.
I would just like to concur with the concern expressed by Councilman Roby. the statistics speak for themselves. A 70% executive session rate for every city council meeting is multiple times higher than any other government entity I have ever heard of. And whether or not it's appropriate, meaning, I take appropriate meaning that it's legal. Whether or not it's legal does not mean it's necessary or it should be done in secret, because that's what executive session is it's done in secret. So it means that it absolutely has to be kept away from the public. And I would question whether or not some of these executive sessions were actually needed to be kept away from public information. But I know that sometimes your hands are tied, and as you say, you get requests to do it. So it's a difficult position. I'm just saying, for the betterment of Watertown going forward, this is something that we should be aware of.
Right, and let's be perfectly clear. I cannot go into executive session without the council's authority. You are the ones that go into executive session by vote. And there's almost never a nay vote. Then you can ask in advance as well. Councilman Hoyer?
I'll just toss out, we haven't gone into executive session for a hot minute. It's been quite a while since we've used it. So to Don's credit, when you did bring it up, I think we did take it very seriously, and we've really eased up on going into it in all scenarios. I would agree with you. I like transparency in the public. If it's an HR situation where it has a specific name of an individual person, I think sparing them that for public view is probably appropriate to go into executive session. I don't know what the subject is tonight, but I just wanted to take note, we have been avoiding it pretty extensively. But then, again, too, let's always keep in mind that, you know, committees aren't public meetings, and when we go into small groups, those aren't public meetings. So, grain of salt.
Councilman Lallam?
To your point and to Reed's point, yeah, we do go into executive session, and obviously we have to vote on it, but very rarely are we privy to what the executive session is. So, I mean, it's a little bit of an unfair statement to say that, you know, the council has to vote on it when most of the time we're not aware of what the executive session item is.
You can ask though, and I
But
have.
in the past, we have not gotten that we're going into executive session.
Well, you can ask. I often don't know until the very day of the council meeting, and like today, several people, and you were on the message string.
I did ask this time,
You
but
did ask, and I told you, so
Yep.
you know why we're going in, and
On this
Councilman Roby knows why we're going in. And, you know, I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm as much of a proponent for transparency as anyone. I completely think that we need to do our business out in the public, and we never, ever, ever take an action without the public getting to see all the details of a contract or whatever the deal happens to be. But to understand enough to know why the deal is being presented, that's why we do it. Councilman Hoyer?
I would say in this situation, Councilman Lallam, Councilman Roby, if you do know the subject of this, and I mean, you can kind of weigh in here and give us an indication if it's appropriate, but yes, in the future, it would be good for us to all get a heads up what it is before we make a decision whether it's appropriate.
And I did share with Councilman Roby and Councilman Lallam. And if you'd rather we don't do that in executive session tonight, please say so. Because you know why we're going in.
Mayor.
Councilman Roby?
Left my hand up.
Okay, Councilman Bueller?
Thanks, Mayor. You know, I think maybe moving forward, you know, I'm just throwing this out. This might be an idea. We could, if we do an executive session, maybe we review that at the end and just ask the question, is this something that we could have done in the open meeting?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could just try to make a habit of doing that when we have an executive session so we can identify times where we might not have had to do that. Thank you.
Well, we do have options, and one option is to meet in lesser groups and to go over several times with the non-quorum sized groups to transmit the information to the council members. But I've really struggled to get certain council members to even answer the message when I'm saying, when are you available? Can you come at X time, then what we get is a group of council members that don't know what they're voting on, and they don't know what the information is, and you don't get the chance to discuss it with the attorney or with each other on an item. And that is always an option. We can do that tonight. We can forgo this if you'd rather, but it's not expedient. Councilman Hoyer?
I'd once again say, though, even with that option, that's no different than an executive session. That's still, you're not calling it executive session, but that's not a public meeting, and the outcome's still the same. We go talk in private, we come back, and we do it in the public.
And I would say that's less transparent.
It's way less transparent. That's why I'm not comfortable with that. I like it when we're all in the same room and get the same information.
Councilman Y?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to say that when we do go into executive session, our attorney is present and make sure that all executive session rules are followed. So the public needs to know that he does keep us on task and make sure that the South Dakota, the laws are followed that the state has set for executive session. So rest assured, public, that when we do go into these executive sessions, we do have legal counsel here that is representing the people and making sure that we're following things the way they should be followed as the state sees.
Thank you for that.
Mayor?
It's true. Councilman Bueller?
You know, and I will just say, and I know we've talked about this before, and that's 2020 was a way different year, and I think we did have a lot of development issues in 20, and the wage study was a big part of that this year as well in 20.
Contract negotiations.
Yep. Thank you.
In general, where there was a lot to talk about. Councilman Holeen?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to disagree with Councilman Y because he is right. We have been following the laws of South Dakota. However, you can follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is open government and transparency, and I feel that the statistics speak for themselves. 70% of the time we've gone into executive session, and only after Councilman Roby has brought it up have we stopped having executive session as often, but what we have done is just switched into these lesser groups instead. We've had a preponderance of these lesser groups, which I agree with Councilman Hoyer is actually way less transparent than even executive session is, because it is a way for people to get councilmen to separate them and to count the votes before you have to bring it to a full public meeting. I disagree with that. So I know that this is a difficult situation, but we can do better. The citizens of Watertown should expect better.
All right. Councilman Lallam?
I do know the two items that are on this. The first one I'm not sure is executive session. The second one I do believe is. So, I mean, I would make the motion to go into executive session based on that, but.
Just for the personnel matter?
Yes. Yep.
But not for the contract matter?
I haven't seen any information on it yet, so I'd rather.
Can I say something, please, quick?
Sure.
So, two things. One, as far as disseminating information that's executive session worthy outside of executive session, I would caution us to do that much because there's a reason for executive session. There's a reason for those things to be transmitted verbally in executive session and not via large email chains and circulating documents. There's a reason for those things to be communicated verbally. So there's not, because they're sensitive matters. By their nature, they are sensitive. And two, I agree with open government, but I would also plug the fact that there are other parties involved typically in these matters, and so the legislature has said in these certain types of issues it is appropriate for the governing body to discuss them in executive session to protect the interests of the other parties, be they economic development related matters and financial interests of developers, be they personnel matters in the interest of keeping confidential personnel matters of our employees, etc. So I would also remember that, and I'm not a fan of the statistics either, but we've had a busy couple of years, especially when it comes to development. So,
thank you. Councilman Roby?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I never anticipated we would be having this discussion. I was merely voicing my dissatisfaction, but I do stand by my statements. Let me also just add what prompted me to write that email back in December was, of course, the frequency of executive session. But the thing that really got me going was there was an article about the new city hall and the possibility of a special space just for executive session. And I thought that was the most absurd thing I've ever heard. We are going to create a special space just for executive session. I agree. We've had a lot of things go on this year, a lot of very good things that required executive session. My point is this, that notwithstanding, other communities have had those issues too. We have used executive session excessively. That's my point. I'll stand by it. All the points made tonight were very good points and actually pretty good discussion. I was just really trying to emphasize we have got to keep our focus on not overusing executive session. Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree with that completely. And I would never want to go into executive session to do something that can be done outside in the open. So that being said, we have a motion, I think, to go into executive session for the personnel matter, but not for the contract matter.
After Matt's determination, I'll go.
Okay, for both. So we have a motion by Lallam. Second by Y. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. We are in executive session.